John Carter stood at the viewing window of Galactic Station Nexus and watched the stars shine in the endless black of space. He had been the human ambassador to the Galactic Council for 3 long years, and today felt different from all the others. Behind him in the meeting hall, the voices of alien species rose and fell like waves, but none of them belonged to humans anymore. Dr. Lisa Morgan walked up beside him carrying a datapad filled with reports nobody would read. She had spent months working on new medical treatments that could save millions of lives across the galaxy, but the Council had voted to shelve her research until further review. The further review would never come, and they both knew it. Commander Jake Sullivan entered the room with heavy steps that echoed against the metal walls. His military uniform looked perfect as always, but his face showed the tiredness of a man who had fought too many battles that others refused to understand. The Talon Empire had used his battle strategies to win 3 major conflicts, but still called human military thinking primitive and crude. Amy Rodriguez finished packing the last of the trade documents into sealed containers. For 2 years, she had worked to create fair trade agreements between humans and other species, but every deal ended the same way. The aliens took what they wanted and gave humans the leftover scraps while calling it generous cooperation. The 4. Humans stood together in silence as the council session continued without them. Through the walls, they could hear the proud voice of Zephyrian Prime Minister Axios as he explained why humans should be grateful for any role in galactic society. The Mollusk Confederation leader Galora added her wet gurgling agreement while the Talon General Ray's Bloodclaw demanded that humans prove their worth through service. John remembered the day 3 years ago when humanity had first received the invitation to join the Galactic Council. The whole species had celebrated what seemed like the greatest moment in human history. Earth had prepared for months, sending their best minds and strongest leaders to represent humanity among the stars. They had come with open hearts and eager minds ready to learn and share with alien civilizations that had existed for thousands of years. The reality had been different from the dream. Every human innovation was dismissed as lucky accident or crude copying of superior alien technology. When Dr. Morgan developed new vaccines that worked on multiple species, the Zephyrians claimed she had stolen their research. When Commander Sullivan created new battle tactics that saved Talon lives, the generals said any primitive species could stumble onto basic strategy through trial and error. The worst part was not the insults or the dismissal, but the casual way the aliens treated humans, like children who needed constant guidance. They spoke about humanity in meetings as if no humans were present. They made decisions about human colonies without asking human opinions. They divided up human discoveries and inventions like parents sharing toys between siblings. Today, the final insult had come during the vote on Outer Rim mining rights. 3 months ago, human exploration ships had discovered rich mineral deposits in 7 systems beyond the galactic border. The deposits contained rare elements needed for advanced technology and medical equipment. Humanity had proposed sharing the mining rights equally among all council species, with humans taking a coordination role since they had found the systems. The vote had been unanimous among non-human species. Humanity would receive no mining rights, no coordination role, and no share of profits. The Zephyrians would control 3 systems, the Mollusk Confederation would take 2 systems, and the Talon Empire would claim the remaining 2. The official reason given was that humans lacked the experience and wisdom to handle such important resources responsibly. John had listened to the vote results in perfect silence. He had not argued or protested or made angry speeches. Instead, he had simply stood up, walked to the communication console, and sent a message that would reach every human ship station and colony in the galaxy within hours. The message contained only 3 words, followed by a long number sequence that every human would recognize. Lisa had been the first to understand what the number sequence meant. She had helped design the protocols years ago when humanity first began expanding into space. Jake had smiled when he saw the code, knowing that his military training had finally found its purpose. Amy had quietly deleted all the trade files from the Galactic database before anyone could stop her. The aliens in the meeting hall continued their discussions about human mining systems, as if humans would simply accept the decision and continue serving. They planned how to use human navigation charts and human mining equipment and human expertise while giving humanity nothing in return. They spoke about the bright future of galactic cooperation without humans as equal partners. John turned away from the window and looked at his three companions. They had spent 3 years trying to build something beautiful with people who saw them as useful tools rather than valued friends. Now it was time to leave those people to discover what they had truly lost. Within 48 hours, every human ship would be gone from galactic space. Every human colony would stand empty. Every human station would be silent. The aliens would wake up to find that their newest members had vanished without explanation, warning, or goodbye. The humans had come seeking partnership and found only exploitation. Perhaps the galaxy was not ready for what humanity offered. Perhaps it was time for the galaxy to learn what it meant to face the universe alone. Commander Zax Viridian watched his flagship's shields flicker and die as the pirate ships closed in for the kill. 3 months ago, this same battle group had destroyed twice as many enemy vessels without taking a single hit. But today, everything had gone wrong from the very beginning. The elegant shield harmonics that human engineers had installed were failing one by one, leaving his proud Zephyrian fleet naked against basic plasma fire. The pirates were nothing special, just a small group of raiders using old weapons and outdated ships that should have been easy targets for the advanced Zephyrian military. But without the human modifications, his shield systems could barely deflect primitive energy blasts that would have bounced off harmlessly just months before. Zax watched 3 of his best cruisers explode in brilliant flashes of light as their ancient Zephyrian defenses crumbled under sustained attack. His communication officer reported more bad news from across the fleet. The targeting systems were losing accuracy, the engine efficiency was dropping, and even basic life support was becoming unreliable. Every system that humans had touched or improved was slowly failing, and nobody understood why or how to fix the problems. The Zephyrian engineers, who had proudly claimed they could build anything better than primitive humans, now admitted they had no idea how the human modifications actually worked. On the industrial world of Kepler Station, Chief Engineer Yuki Tanaka stared at the 4th mining robot to break down this week. The sleek automated systems that had been humanity's gift to galactic civilization were becoming expensive scrap metal as their complex programming degraded without proper maintenance. The alien engineers had learned to operate the machines, but they had never bothered to understand the elegant code that made everything work so smoothly. Yuki had tried to explain the basic principles to her mollusk supervisors, but they insisted that simple operation was enough knowledge for their purposes. Now those same supervisors screamed demands for immediate repairs while offering no useful suggestions about how to accomplish the impossible task. The mining output had dropped by 60% in 3 months, and every day brought new system failures that nobody could predict or prevent. The beautiful simplicity of human design had hidden incredible complexity beneath its surface. Every robot contained thousands of decision trees and adaptive routines that let it handle unexpected situations with creative solutions. The aliens had seen only the final results without understanding the sophisticated intelligence that made those results possible. Now they faced machinery that could follow simple orders but could not think or adapt when conditions changed. Trade routes that humanity had established and maintained over 3 years were becoming death traps for unwary travelers. Merchant Captain Vel Draxon of the Traders Guild learned this lesson the hard way when his nav computer failed during a routine hyperspace jump between Altair and Vega. The human-designed navigation algorithms had made interstellar travel as safe as walking between rooms, but without constant updates and maintenance, the systems were reverting to their original unreliable state. Vel found himself trapped in hyperspace, with no clear way back to normal space, as his alien built back up. Systems gave conflicting readings about his position and heading. The rescue operation took 18 hours and cost more money than his ship would earn in 6 months of trading. Worse yet, similar incidents were happening throughout the galaxy as the sophisticated network of human-maintained jump points and navigation beacons went silent one by one. The Traders Guild had always complained about human fees for navigation services, calling them highway robbery and promising to develop better systems using superior alien technology. Now they discovered that creating and maintaining safe hyperspace routes required constant monitoring and adjustment by teams of skilled engineers who understood both mathematics and intuition in ways that pure logic could not match. Prime Minister. Galora of the Mollusk Confederation called emergency session after emergency session, but her bureaucratic solutions could not fix problems that required hands-on technical expertise. Her species had mastered the art of organization and administration, but they had always relied on other species to handle actual implementation of their carefully planned policies. Without humans to bridge the gap between theory and practice, their elaborate government structure was becoming useless. The communication networks that connected thousands of worlds across the galaxy were experiencing delays and failures as the quantum entanglement protocols slowly degraded. Messages that once crossed the galaxy in minutes now took hours or days to reach their destinations, and some never arrived at all. The elegant simplicity of human quantum engineering had made instant galactic communication seem as natural as breathing, but maintaining those connections required constant fine-tuning that only human specialists had truly understood. Dr. Keth Valorian, the Zephyrian scientist who had publicly dismissed human medical research as primitive guesswork, now faced his greatest challenge as a deadly plague spread through the outer colonies. The broad-spectrum vaccines that humans had developed could have stopped the disease in its early stages, but those vaccines required manufacturing processes that no remaining species could duplicate successfully. Valorian's team worked desperately to recreate treatments that human doctors had perfected years ago, but every attempt failed because they lacked understanding of the underlying biological principles. Human medicine had combined advanced technology with intuitive understanding of how living systems actually worked, rather than how they should work according to theory. Without that combination of knowledge and instinct, the plague continued spreading, while Valorian's sophisticated equipment produced nothing but expensive failures. The Talon Empire discovered that their recent military victories had depended more on human tactical innovation than on their own warrior tradition when they faced their greatest enemy, the mechanical synthesis forces. General Ray's Bloodclaw had used human strategies to win 3 major battles against the robots, but he had never bothered to learn why those strategies worked or how to adapt them to new situations. Without human advisors to analyze enemy patterns and suggest creative countermeasures, the Talon forces reverted to their traditional charge and fight tactics that had worked against organic enemies but proved useless against logical machines. The synthesis robots easily predicted and countered every move, while the proud Talon warriors died in futile frontal assaults that accomplished nothing except demonstrating their courage. Council meetings became increasingly desperate as species blamed each other for the growing crisis while refusing to admit their own dependence on human expertise. The unity that had defined galactic civilization for centuries began cracking as fear and desperation replaced cooperation and mutual respect. Nobody wanted to say the obvious truth that they needed the humans back, but everyone knew that the galaxy was slowly falling apart without them. 6 months after the humans vanished, the Galactic Communication Network suffered its first major collapse when the entire Outer Rim sector lost contact with the central government. The quantum entanglement arrays that had made instant communication possible across thousands of light years were failing faster than alien engineers could repair them, and nobody understood the elegant mathematics that made the whole system work. Communication. Delays that had once measured in seconds now stretched to hours or days as messages were forced to travel through increasingly unreliable relay stations. Entire star systems found themselves isolated from galactic civilization while their desperate calls for help disappeared into the growing silence between worlds. The network that had taken humans 3 years to build and optimize was collapsing in months without proper maintenance. Dr. Keth Valorian stood in his laboratory surrounded by the bodies of his research assistants as the plague he had failed to stop finally reached the core worlds. The disease had mutated 3 times since its first appearance, and each new strain was deadlier than the last, while remaining completely resistant to every treatment his team had developed. The broad-spectrum vaccines that humans had created would have adapted automatically to handle the mutations, but Valorian's static formulations were useless against an evolving enemy. The Zephyrian government had ordered him to find a cure at any cost, but Valorian now realized that the cost was beyond his ability to pay. Human medical research had combined intuitive understanding of biological systems with advanced technology in ways that his purely logical approach could never duplicate. He had spent his career dismissing human medicine as primitive guesswork, but now he would have given anything for one human doctor who understood how living things actually worked, rather than how they should work according to theory. The plague spread from world to world, as the failing communication network prevented effective quarantine measures and the breakdown of interstellar travel made it impossible to distribute medical supplies where they were needed most. Valorian watched helplessly as his proud civilization died around him while he filled research reports that nobody would ever read because there was nobody left to care about his failures. General Ray's Bloodclaw retreated from his 5th consecutive defeat as the synthesis robots advanced deeper into Talon territory with each passing day. His traditional warrior tactics had proven completely useless against an enemy that could predict every move and counter every strategy with mathematical precision. The robots fought with perfect coordination and flawless logic, while his troops died in confused charges that accomplished nothing except demonstrating their dedication to hopeless causes. The human tactical advisors had understood something that Bloodclaw was only beginning to grasp after months of devastating losses. Fighting machines required different thinking than fighting organic enemies because machines did not make emotional mistakes or act on instinct or intuition. Every human strategy had been designed to exploit the rigid patterns of artificial intelligence, while avoiding the mathematical precision that made robots so dangerous in direct combat. Without human guidance, the Talon Empire was losing its war against an enemy they had easily defeated just months before. Bloodclaw's own generals were beginning to question his leadership as world after world fell to the advancing robot armies. The proud warrior tradition that had sustained his people for centuries was proving inadequate against an enemy that felt no fear, respected no courage, and never made the mistakes that organic fighters relied upon to achieve victory. Food coordinator Chen Liu watched the hydroponic systems fail one by one as the complex ecosystem management programs that humans had developed began collapsing without proper maintenance. The agricultural worlds that fed half the galaxy were experiencing their first major crop failures in decades as the sophisticated environmental controls stopped working and nobody understood how to fix them. The humans had created closed-loop systems that recycled nutrients, managed soil chemistry, and controlled pest populations with elegant efficiency that seemed almost magical to alien observers. But the magic was actually careful engineering that required constant monitoring and adjustment by people who understood both technology and biology in ways that no other species had mastered. Without human oversight, the agricultural systems were reverting to their natural chaotic state as nutrient imbalances killed crops and pest populations exploded beyond control. Chen Liu sent increasingly desperate reports to the Mollusk Confederation government, but received only bureaucratic responses that offered no practical solutions to the growing crisis. The food shortages would begin within months as stored supplies ran out and crop yields continued dropping. Billions of people across the galaxy would face starvation while their governments argued about responsibility and blame, rather than working together to solve problems that required expertise none of them possessed. The Mollusk Confederation's elaborate administrative structure was proving completely useless for handling technical crises that required immediate action rather than careful committee review. Prime Minister Galora called meeting after meeting where officials discussed the problems in great detail while offering no practical solutions because they lacked the technical knowledge to understand what had gone wrong or how to fix it. Captain Rex Nordstrom received orders to investigate the abandoned human colonies, but his ship's navigation systems were so unreliable that the journey took 3 times longer than it should have while consuming twice as much fuel. The hyperspace routes that humans had established and maintained were becoming increasingly dangerous as the complex calculations required for safe travel exceeded the capabilities of alien computer systems. The Galactic Council was slowly coming apart as species turned against each other in desperate attempts to assign blame for the growing crisis. The Zephyrians accused the Mollusk Confederation of administrative incompetence, while the Mollusks blamed Talon military failures for allowing the robot threat to spread. The Talon Empire insisted that Zephyrian technology was inferior, while all 3 species privately admitted they needed human expertise to solve problems that grew worse every day. Trade between worlds was becoming impossible as the transportation networks failed and communication delays made it impossible to coordinate complex transactions. The economic system that had supported galactic civilization for centuries was grinding to a halt as each species retreated into isolation rather than working together to maintain the connections that made interstellar commerce possible. The unity that had defined the Galactic Council was fracturing under the pressure of cascading failures that nobody understood how to stop. Every solution proposed by one species was rejected by others who feared giving up their independence to neighbors they no longer trusted. The cooperation that had seemed so natural when humans were present to facilitate communication and compromise was proving impossible to maintain without neutral mediators who understood everyone's needs. Emergency sessions became shouting matches as fear and desperation overwhelmed the diplomatic traditions that had kept peace for centuries. The galaxy was learning that cooperation was much harder than competition, and that maintaining civilization required skills that went far beyond military strength or technological sophistication. Captain Rex Nordstrom guided his exploration vessel Starbound through the debris field where humanity's greatest space station had once orbited Earth. 1 year after the mysterious disappearance, the Galactic Council had finally authorized a massive search operation to find answers or survivors, but what they discovered in human space defied all logical explanation. The station was still there, complete and undamaged, but completely empty of human life. Every corridor showed signs of normal daily activity with personal belongings left behind and workstations still displaying active data, but not a single human remained anywhere. It was as if millions of people had simply decided to walk away from their lives at exactly the same moment without taking anything with them. Dr. Mira Blackwood led the xenoarchaeology team through the residential sections of the station where they found apartments that looked like their owners had just stepped out for a few minutes. Meals sat half-finished on dining tables with food still fresh in preservation units. Children's toys were scattered across play areas as if games had been interrupted in the middle. Books lay open on reading devices with bookmarks placed at pages that would never be finished. The most disturbing discovery was in the Central Command Center, where duty logs showed normal operations continuing right up until the moment when all human signatures simply vanished from the sensor records. The last entry in the official station Log was a routine maintenance report filed by engineer Paul Richardson just hours before the disappearance, with no indication that anything unusual was happening. Commander Jake Sullivan's military quarters contained detailed tactical plans for defending human space against potential threats, but all the files ended abruptly on the same day with no explanation for why the preparations had been abandoned. His weapon lockers stood open and empty, but scans showed no signs of violence or struggle anywhere in the facility. The team moved on to New Terra, the crown jewel of human colonization, where they found an entire world frozen in time. The planetary capital looked like a photograph of normal life, with vehicles parked neatly in streets and buildings, showing every sign of recent occupation. The agricultural domes continued producing food for nobody, while automated factories manufactured goods that would never be used. Amy Rodriguez's trade offices contained contracts and agreements that represented billions of credits in pending transactions, but every human signature was missing from documents that should have been completed weeks before the disappearance. The alien partners in these deals had received their payments and delivered their goods, but the humans who had arranged everything were simply gone. Dr. Mira Blackwood found the first real clue in Paul Richardson's personal laboratory, where encrypted files contained references to something called Project Exodus. The encryption was beyond anything the search team could break, but the file timestamps showed that Richardson had been working on the project for months before the disappearance, with increasing urgency as the date approached. The project files were scattered across dozens of human facilities, but every attempt to decrypt them failed because the encryption used quantum algorithms that required human-designed computers to process correctly. The aliens had copies of human technology, but they lacked the deep understanding needed to make it work at its full potential. Richardson's personal logs contained fragments of readable text that hinted at revolutionary breakthroughs in consciousness, research, and dimensional physics, but the technical details were hidden behind layers of security that would have challenged even human experts. The logs mentioned meetings with other human scientists and references to preparations that would change everything, but gave no clear indication of what those preparations involved. The search teams discovered that humans had been monitoring galactic communications for years using quantum receivers that no other species knew existed. The intercepted messages revealed exactly how little the other species thought of humanity and how they planned to exploit human innovations while giving nothing meaningful in return. The humans had known about every insult, every dismissive comment, and every plan to exclude them from decisions about their own discoveries. One partially recovered file contained a message from Ambassador John Carter to the human population that made the team's blood run cold. The message spoke of disappointment and betrayal, but also of hope for something greater than the physical, limitations that bound other species to their crude understanding of reality. Carter wrote about transcending the petty politics of galactic civilization and ascending to a level of existence where cooperation was natural rather than forced. Dr. Lisa Morgan's medical research facility contained her final experiments in consciousness, transfer, and neural network integration, but all the test subjects were gone and the equipment was shut down in perfect order. Her notes indicated breakthrough discoveries in quantum consciousness that could revolutionize understanding of what it meant to be alive and aware, but the practical applications remained hidden behind the same encryption that protected all human secrets. The search teams found similar patterns on every human world and station. Normal life interrupted at exactly the same moment with no signs of violence or struggle, but also no indication of where everyone had gone or why they had left everything behind. The coordination required for such a massive disappearance suggested planning on a scale that dwarfed anything in galactic history. The most unsettling discovery came from deep space monitoring stations where human-built sensors had recorded strange quantum fluctuations in the moments before the disappearance. The readings showed energy patterns that matched no known technology, but seemed to involve manipulation of space-time itself on a level that current science insisted was impossible. Captain Nordstrom compiled his final report with growing unease, as the evidence pointed toward conclusions that challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about human capabilities. The search had found no bodies, no ships, no signs of mass evacuation, but also no explanation for how millions of humans could simply vanish from reality without leaving any trace of their passage. The encrypted files remained unbreakable barriers to understanding what had really happened, but the fragments they could read suggested that humanity had achieved something that went far beyond conventional technology. The references to Project Exodus and dimensional transcendence painted a picture of a species that had evolved beyond the need for physical existence while retaining the ability to observe and judge their former allies. As the search teams prepared to return to Galactic Council space with their disturbing findings, they began to understand that they were not looking for missing people, but for ascended beings who had chosen to abandon the physical universe, rather than continue suffering the indignities of galactic politics. The question was not where the humans had gone, but whether they would ever choose to return. Dr. Elena Vasquez worked alone in the research station at Proxima Beta, completely unaware that her entire species had vanished from the galaxy 2 years ago. She had been in deep space studying exotic quantum phenomena when the recall order went out, and her communication array had been damaged by a solar storm just days before the evacuation began. By the time she repaired her equipment and received the backlog of messages, humanity was already gone. The discovery of a surviving human sent shockwaves through the dying Galactic Council. Species that had barely managed to maintain basic civilization, without human expertise, suddenly had hope that their former partners might return if properly approached. Elena found herself the most important person in the galaxy, as desperate alien governments competed for her attention and assistance. Elena had been studying with alien universities when the Exodus occurred, so she knew more about galactic affairs than most humans, while retaining the innovative thinking that made her species so valuable. She watched the recordings of failed battles, diseased worlds, and collapsed infrastructure with growing amazement at how quickly everything had fallen, apart without human involvement. The revelation came when Elena accessed the encrypted Project Exodus files using her human-designed quantum computer. The algorithms that had defeated alien codebreakers for 2 years yielded to her touch like flowers opening to sunlight as layer after layer of security dissolved to reveal the truth that would change everything. Project Exodus was humanity's greatest achievement and their final gift to a galaxy that had never appreciated what they offered. The project had succeeded in transferring human consciousness to a higher dimensional plane where they could exist as pure thought and energy, while maintaining their individual identities and memories. Every human had participated willingly in the mass ascension that freed them from physical limitations, while granting abilities that seemed magical to lower dimensional beings. Elena explained to the stunned council representatives that humans had not died or fled to distant stars, but had evolved beyond the need for physical bodies while retaining the ability to interact with normal space whenever they chose. They existed now as beings of pure consciousness who could manipulate matter and energy through focused intention rather than crude mechanical tools. The technology for dimensional ascension had been offered to the Galactic Council months before the Exodus, but the elder species had rejected it as impossible human fantasy. Their scientists had dismissed the research as theoretical nonsense, while their politicians had refused to fund projects that challenged their understanding of reality. In their arrogance, they had turned away from the greatest gift any species could offer. Elena played recordings of the final council session where human representatives had tried one last time to share their breakthrough discoveries. Dr. Lisa Morgan had presented detailed research on consciousness transfer, while Commander Jake Sullivan had demonstrated practical applications that could revolutionize everything from medicine to space travel. The alien delegates had listened, with polite condescension, before voting to table the proposals indefinitely. The humans had left not because they were angry, but because they were deeply disappointed in species they had hoped to call friends and partners. They had discovered the secret of transcending physical existence and wanted to share that gift with everyone, but the galaxy had proven too proud and narrow-minded to accept help from beings they considered primitive newcomers. Elena revealed that the ascended humans were still watching from their higher dimension, fully aware of the chaos and suffering that had followed their departure. They had the power to return instantly and restore all the failing systems, but they had chosen to let the galaxy face the consequences of its own arrogance and prejudice. The monitoring had been more extensive than anyone had imagined. Human quantum. Receivers had intercepted every private communication between alien governments, including detailed plans to exploit human innovations, while excluding humans from decision-making processes. The ascended beings knew exactly how their former allies had really felt about them, and what they had planned to do with human discoveries. Elena shared recordings from the dimensional plane where John Carter and other human leaders debated whether to intervene as galactic civilization collapsed around them. Some argued for immediate return to prevent unnecessary suffering, while others insisted that the galaxy needed to learn hard lessons about cooperation and respect before humanity could trust them again. The debates revealed the depth of human disappointment with galactic politics and the genuine sadness they felt at watching former friends destroy themselves through pride and stubbornness. The humans had not abandoned the galaxy out of spite, but out of recognition that their presence had enabled bad behavior rather than encouraging growth and maturity. Dr. Lisa Morgan's voice from beyond physical reality spoke of her frustration at watching billions die from diseases she could cure in moments if the galaxy would only admit it needed help and ask properly. Commander Jake Sullivan described his pain at seeing good soldiers die in battles he could win easily if pride did not prevent honest cooperation. The ascended humans had established conditions for their return that went far beyond simple apologies or promises of better treatment. They required fundamental changes in how galactic society operated, including genuine equality between species rather than the hierarchical system that had dominated for centuries. They wanted proof that the galaxy had learned to value cooperation over competition and wisdom over mere intelligence. Elena warned the Council that time was running out for meaningful reconciliation. The ascended humans were considering withdrawing completely from this dimensional plane to explore higher realms of existence where they would be forever beyond the reach of physical beings. If the galaxy could not prove it had changed before they departed permanently, all hope of restoration would be lost. The technological failures were accelerating as human-designed systems degraded beyond the point where alien engineers could maintain them even badly. The synthesis robot armies were conquering new worlds every day while plague spread unchecked and economic collapse brought starvation to billions. The galaxy had perhaps months rather than years before complete civilizational breakdown made recovery impossible. Elena offered to serve as intermediary between the physical and ascended realms, but warned that she could not force her former species to return if they decided the galaxy was not worth saving. The humans had transcended the need for gratitude or recognition, but they still cared about justice and fairness and cooperation between thinking beings. The final revelation was that humanity had always been different from other galactic species in ways that went deeper than mere technology or tactics. They had evolved on a world that required constant cooperation between individuals and groups to survive, while most other species had developed in environments where competition and dominance were more important than working together. Elena explained that human innovations had always been based on synthesis and integration rather than the specialized expertise that other species prized. Humans succeeded by combining different types of knowledge in creative ways that no single expert could achieve alone. That collaborative approach to problem-solving was exactly what the galaxy needed to survive, but it required humility and openness that most species had never developed. The ascended humans were waiting to see if the galaxy could learn those lessons before deciding whether physical existence was worth returning to, or if they should continue their journey into realms beyond imagination. 3 years after humanity's disappearance, the Galactic Council faced extinction as the last free worlds prepared for final evacuation. The synthesis robots had conquered half the galaxy using tactics that only human military advisors had understood how to counter. Plagues ravaged the remaining populations, while economic collapse brought starvation to billions who had once lived in abundance. The emergency session convened in a makeshift facility on Sanctuary Station, as the original council chambers had fallen to robot forces the previous month. Representatives from fewer than 30 species attended, while hundreds of others had either been destroyed by the machines or retreated into isolation to face their doom alone. Ambassador Korvax of the Centauri Republic stood before the desperate assembly, knowing that this would likely be the last chance for galactic civilization to save itself. His species had been among the few that had treated humans as equals rather than useful servants, and now he carried the responsibility of speaking for a dying galaxy. Elena Vasquez sat in the observer section, watching the proceedings with growing sadness as proud species that had ruled the stars for centuries begged for salvation from beings they had dismissed as primitive. The irony was not lost on her that these same aliens had voted just 3 years ago to exclude humanity from decisions about their own discoveries. Prime Minister Galora of the Mollusk Confederation spoke first, admitting that her species' bureaucratic approach to governance had proven completely inadequate for handling the technological crisis that followed humanity's departure. Her elaborate administrative structure had been designed for managing stable systems, not for adapting to rapid changes that required immediate action and creative solutions. General Ray's Bloodclaw acknowledged that Talon military tradition had failed against an enemy that felt no fear and made no emotional mistakes. His warriors had died bravely in battle after battle, but bravery alone could not overcome the mathematical precision of artificial intelligence that anticipated every move and countered every strategy with perfect logic. Dr. Keth Valorian admitted that Zephyrian science had proven incapable of solving problems that required intuitive understanding rather than pure logical analysis. His people had mastered the art of theoretical knowledge, but they lacked the practical wisdom that humans had applied so naturally to every challenge they encountered. One by one, the surviving species confessed their failures and acknowledged their dependence on human expertise that they had taken for granted while refusing to offer genuine partnership in return. The admissions came with great difficulty from beings who had considered themselves superior to primitive newcomers who should have been grateful for any role in galactic society. Ambassador Korvax made the formal plea that would determine the fate of civilization itself. He spoke directly to Elena, knowing that his words would be heard by the ascended humans who watched from beyond physical reality. He acknowledged the Council's mistakes and promised genuine equality for humanity if they would return to save their former allies from consequences of their own arrogance. The response came not through Elena, but through every communication device in the galaxy simultaneously, as John Carter's voice spoke from the dimensional plane where humanity now existed. His words carried the weight of collective decision made by millions of ascended beings who had debated the question for months while watching their former neighbors destroy themselves. Carter explained that humanity had left not out of anger but out of profound disappointment at being treated as servants rather than partners by species they had hoped to call friends. They had offered their greatest discoveries and received only condescension in return. They had contributed solutions to every major crisis and been excluded from decisions about their own contributions. The ascended humans had watched the galaxy's suffering with genuine sadness, but also with recognition that the pain was necessary for learning lessons that could not be taught through words alone. The species that had refused to value cooperation and respect had been forced to face the consequences of their choices without the safety net of human innovation to cushion their failures. Carter announced that humanity would consider returning, but only if the galaxy could prove it had truly changed rather than simply become desperate enough to make promises it would not keep. The test would be unprecedented in galactic history, requiring unanimous consent not just from governments, but from every citizen capable of making an informed choice. For the first time in Council history, a decision would be made by popular vote. Across all surviving worlds, with every individual, regardless of species or status, having equal voice in determining the future. The question was simple, but its implications were profound. Would the galaxy accept humanity as true equals with full partnership in all decisions affecting galactic civilization? The voting process would take months as the message was transmitted to every inhabited world using the failing communication networks that still functioned. Each citizen would have to choose between pride and survival, between maintaining traditional hierarchies and embracing the cooperation that humans represented. Elena watched the quantum signatures that indicated ascended humans were preparing contingency plans for either outcome. If the vote failed, they would continue their journey into higher dimensions, leaving the galaxy to face its fate alone. If the vote succeeded, they would return not as saviors, but as partners in rebuilding something better than what had existed before. The campaign that followed divided every surviving world as citizens debated whether they could truly accept former servants as equals. Some argued that desperate times required desperate measures, while others insisted that giving up traditional authority structures would destroy everything their civilizations had built over thousands of years. The robots continued their advance during the voting period, conquering new systems, while the galaxy argued about its future. Plagues spread unchecked as medical systems failed completely. Food shortages became famines as agricultural networks collapsed. Yet still, the debate continued as species struggled with the fundamental question of whether they could change enough to deserve salvation. Elena received private communications from the Ascended Realm as humanity prepared for either possibility. If they returned, it would be to a galaxy that had proven capable of growth and change. If they departed permanently, it would be with sadness, but also with confidence that they had made the right choice in transcending physical limitations. The final vote totals arrived through the last functioning communication relay as Sanctuary Station prepared for evacuation ahead of advancing robot forces. Across thousands of worlds and billions of citizens, the decision had been made by the narrowest possible margin, with just enough voices calling for change to meet the requirements for unanimous consent. Empty human cities across the galaxy began to shimmer with quantum energy as reality itself prepared for humanity's return. The ascended beings had accepted the galaxy's plea, but their homecoming would mark the beginning of a new era based on genuine partnership rather than the exploitation that had driven them away. John Carter's final message promised that humanity would return not to restore the old order, but to help build something better that valued cooperation over competition and wisdom over mere intelligence. The galaxy had passed its test, but the real work of creating a civilization worthy of survival was just beginning. As Elena watched the first shimmering figures of returning humans materialize in the station corridors, she wondered whether the galaxy had truly learned its lessons, or whether desperation had simply forced temporary changes that would not survive the return of prosperity and security. Only time would tell if this second chance would lead to genuine partnership or repeat the mistakes that had nearly destroyed everything.